the General Assembly passed a law that basically stripped power to appoint EMC members from the governor and reappointed that power to the General Assembly, which is very polluter-friendly right now, and to the Commissioner of Agriculture, who is also very polluter-friendly. And so this new EMC, made up of new members, this new distribution of power, has blocked DEQ's efforts to regulate PFAS. So we almost had PFAS and 1,4-dioxane regulations, and then this new EMC got in place, and they have blocked and even rolled back. Some of these rules were already tentatively in place, and they've rolled back those rules. And these rules that we're looking at, what they're calling, monitoring and minimization rules, were actually written by polluters, and that's pretty well documented. If you want to kind of get into the nitty-gritty of that, I can walk you through it. But these rules were basically presented to the EMC by polluters, and so they're just exactly what they want. They don't have any teeth. All they do is request that polluters monitor quarterly and request that industry consider ways that they could reduce their PFAS and 1,4-dioxane discharges. And because they don't have any teeth or any requirements, that means that industry can actually ignore that and increase their discharges of PFAS and 1,4-dioxane. And of course, we all know that rules without consequences are meaningless. If we all thought we could drive however fast we wanted to, wherever we wanted to, then we would do it. The reason we don't do it is because there's penalties when we break those rules. There are no penalties in these rules, and if industry sees a chance to increase their profit with no penalty, they will increase their profit with penalty a lot of times, and so if they can increase their profit with no penalty, then you can bet that they will ignore them. So, how can we push back? Make your voice heard at this Thursday's public hearing. There are public hearings being held across the state. Some of them have already happened in Fayetteville. There's one tonight in Raleigh. This one is for our area. It only officially deals with PFAS. They broke these hearings up. Some of them dealt with PFAS. Some of them dealt with 1,4-dioxane. There was a 1,4-dioxane hearing in Fayetteville. This is a PFAS hearing. However, I'm going to talk more about that in a minute. So most of us in the room, as I said, if we drink water out of Cape River, we're drinking both PFAS and 1,4-dioxane, right? We're paying more for our water bills because we're treating PFAS and we'll be treating 1,4-dioxane. We are treating 1,4-dioxane now to some degree. And so I think it's totally legitimate that everybody in this room would give comments expressing concerns about both of those contaminants. And we'll talk a little bit about how we do that. So the way these hearings go is that public hearings are like a legal requirement for new rules, and so there's kind of legalistic things you have to do. So if you're going to discuss both sets of rules in your comment, and you're going to give a public comment, this is kind of the suggested language from Southern Environmental Law Center and other groups of what you should say at the beginning to make sure that you trigger them paying attention to your comments for both, right? So if you say, I request that this comment be included in the public record for both 1,4-dioxane and the PFAS monitoring and minimization rules, that public comment will be sent to both of those sets of reviewers for this rule. If you were to just talk about PFAS at this hearing, they wouldn't consider any of your concerns around 1,4-dioxane. You didn't specifically kind of say that you want this to be considered for both, or they could. As I was saying, this is part of the official rulemaking process. Every comment is required to be read and considered by the hearing officer, and that hearing officer is required to then address each comment that's reasonable. And so they really do matter, and it's really important to say what's on your mind. You don't have to be a scientist. You don't have to be an expert. If you drink water, which I think all of you probably do, then you have just as much of a right to be up in front of the EMC giving comments about your concerns about industry dumping toxic pollutants into your water as a scientist or as a riverkeeper or as a Sierra Club staffer or a medical doctor or anybody. You have every right in the world to say exactly what you think and what you're concerned about from your own perspective. If you're a fisherman and that's all you think about is fish and you want to be able to eat fish out of the river, that's just as valid as if you're a mom and you're filling your bottle to make formula for your baby, as if you're a property owner and your well's contaminated. And so this is always, to me, a tricky part about public comments is people feel like, I can't get up there. What do I have to say? How could this be important? It's absolutely important, no matter what it is that you're concerned about on any of these contracts, that you get up and speak and let your voice be heard.
Okay. Is it more impactful to speak as a citizen or a representative of Cape Fear River Watch or Sierra Club? What's the better impact?
Well, I don't have the absolute right answer on that, so I'll let other people kind of throw out ideas. I mean, I think you are a citizen as a member of Sierra Club and as a member of Cape Fear River Watch. I actually think that a lot of times it's more impactful for the EMC to hear from somebody who is a citizen, who is a member of an organization, than it is to hear from me, who works at Cape Fear River Watch. I think it's actually a lot of times. We heard this about an earlier hearing in Fayetteville, actually. One of our staff, Rob Clark, who's out of town right now, but he was at that hearing on 1,4-dioxane. And he said somebody was there that hadn't planned to speak. They were just there kind of hearing things, and they kind of heard what was going on, and they stood up to speak. And he said the EMC visibly, sat up in their seat and paid more attention with this person who was not at all, giving prepared remarks or polished remarks, but they were giving remarks clearly from, their perspective as a resident of Fayetteville, somebody who was drinking this water. And he said that it was a noticeable change in the way that EMC listened. Come on in, no words. Listened compared to, a lot of the folks that were giving very polished and prepared remarks. So all that to say, it's not, this is not a contest to see who can, give the most polish. It's more of a contest to see who can speak from the heart and really, talk about why this matters personally. If you don't have them already, we've kind of got a little sheet here that gives you some ideas on, kind of how you might frame your comments. Again, it doesn't matter how you frame them. That's just if you kind of want a starting point. And Dana's passed out a lot of good information that you could read over and apply to your comments. And I think everybody in this room would be a good sounding board for comments. Speaking is fantastic. If you can speak, that's a great way to show, that hey, these are real people that really care here. Just showing up, if you're just like, I cannot get up in front of people and speak, just being there that evening to kind of show that the community is concerned about it, even if you don't speak, is better than not coming. If you decide not to speak, but maybe you're a great writer, please send in comments. Don't just think, well, a lot of people spoke tonight. It doesn't matter if I add, my 2 cents in there. It very much matters. You might have something that's different to say. You might have something that's going to require that hearing officer to really think about a slightly different thing than they were thinking about before. So it very much matters that your voice is heard. And it's pretty likely, I would say it's pretty likely that this is going to be a crowded hearing Thursday. And so the hearing officer is likely going to say, I'm going to give everybody 3 minutes. So I would plan your comments for 3 minutes. If it's a really packed house, it's possible they could say, we're only going to have 2 minutes. So if you plan a 3-minute comment, it might be good to think about, what could I do to shorten this by, a minute? Just in case this hearing officer says, I've only got 2 minutes to give my comments. And then you can turn in your comments that night. You can walk your comments that you read from right up to the desk and turn them in. That is submitting those comments however you wrote them. And it doesn't make any difference how long it would take you to read them. And then you can turn around and submit 5 or 10 or 100 pages of comments if you wanted to the email that I'm getting ready to show you. And those comments will be considered as well. It's not like an either or, because none of us, I think, get to say what we really feel about industry dumping pollutants into our drinking water in 3 minutes. I know I don't. So say what you can in 3. Come on in. Say what you can in 3 minutes. Be prepared for maybe that to be a little bit shorter. Hopefully they give everybody 3 minutes. But if there's, if the numbers in the room and the sign-ups on the list show that they're not going to get through those at 9 o'clock, they're probably going to shorten. So be prepared. And then don't forget to send in written comments too. You can go into a lot more detail. If you do send written comments, this is a similar thing. If you send written comments and you want to just talk about PFAS, put PFAS minimization in the subject line. If you want to just talk about 1,4-dioxane, put 1,4-dioxane minimization in the subject line. If your comments are addressing both of these industrial contaminants that are in your drinking water supply right now, send 2 different emails, and in the subject line of one of them, the text can be the same, but in the subject line, put PFAS in one and 1,4-dioxane in the other. That way, they get dropped into the right bucket and they get considered. And I know that's kind of annoying, but that's just the way these hearings go. They want to make sure you're there addressing the right thing. You don't have to talk a lot of, you don't have to meet any criteria beyond that. You don't have to say only PFAS throughout your comments or only 1,4-dioxane. But in the beginning, just make it clear what you're talking about. City Hall down at Skyline Center, Thursday, April 23rd. Speaker registration begins at 5. So, if you really have to get out of there at 7, you probably want to get there right at 5 and go ahead and get your name on the list so that they're going to call in the order that you sign up. So, it'd be great if you can stay for the whole thing, but if you can't, sign up early. Wear blue for clean water. I mean, that's something we've talked about, is just kind of making sure that when the EMC looks out over the audience, it's clear who the audience is there to support. We're there for clean water. And then that's the email address for public comments, which is going out a lot of different places. It's all over the place, but I think that's it for the presentation, the black and white presentation.
So I live in Brunswick County, and we have this reverse osmosis. Does that take out the PFAS and the dioxin?
It will take out most of the PFAS. It will not necessarily take out 1,4-dioxane, and you will pay the $170 million that it took to install that reverse osmosis system in your water bill every month, here on out. And it's especially for 1,4-dioxane, reverse osmosis is not guaranteed to. Okay. And there's some questions. Actually, Dana might know more about this. Dana, do you know if RO removes all, even ultra short chain PFAS?
RO is better at the ultra short chain than the GAC system that most of the people in Wilmington are drinking. I don't think anything is
Yep. I'll get you
Hey,
there.
Kev, are there other industries other than Chemours that are either upstream or have plans to have plants there that could discharge 1,4-dioxane or PFAS?
There's 500 1,4-dioxane dischargers in North Carolina. 1,4-dioxane is ubiquitous in industry. It's used in plastic. It's a solvent, so it's a powerful solvent that you can use to clean machinery. 500 1,4-dioxane dischargers. The largest one for us is actually, it's the city of Asheboro. The city of Asheboro is taking industrial waste from industry, from a company called StarPet that makes plastic. And because they're a wastewater treatment, a municipal wastewater treatment plant that's designed to treat human waste, they don't treat the chemical waste, and so it just runs right through the system. So the largest discharger into our drinking water supply is Asheboro. And we've sued Asheboro about that, and that lawsuit's moving forward. But there are others. There are lots of others. And there are other PFAS dischargers too. Chemours is the one that's very well known, and you know, but they're not the only one. In fact, there are others in the Cape Fear Basin that are discharging right now into the Northeast Cape Fear River, and just to give you an idea of like kind of, you know, that's why you need rules like this instead of going after each facility one at a time. You got 500 1,4-dioxane facilities, you got multiple PFAS facilities, but the company in the Northeast Cape Fear is called Lear. It's a secondary user. They make automotive fabric, and they discharge PFAS into the Northeast Cape Fear River, the headwaters of the Northeast Cape Fear River, and we caught fish there and sent them to the same lab that the state used to analyze their fish for the consumption advisory that DHHS issued for PFAS in fish tissue. So they said, you know, basically women and children, women of childbearing age and children shouldn't eat any fish out of the Cape Fear River downstream from Chemours because of PFAS. Well, the levels in the Northeast Cape Fear, where Lear was, were between 8 and 20 times higher than the levels in the main stem of the Cape Fear River where Chemours was. And so, just to say that, like, it's not just Chemours. There's you know, biosolid application from wastewater treatment plants that have PFAS in it. There are, you know, landfills that are discharging PFAS. The Sampson County landfill discharges PFAS into groundwater and surface water. So more than just one facility for sure.
Sierra Club's doing a tour of one of the treatment plants with Cape Fear Public Utility, and they seem to be pretty proud of the way they purify the water. In reality, how well do they do?
Oh, I'll get Dana for that one. So I'll give you my thoughts about it. Dana knows more than I do about it, but I think the Cape Fear Public Utility Authority is doing. I think they are trying very hard. I think they spent a lot of money installing a treatment system that, you know, seemed like the best treatment system at the time. But you know, there are things that slip through that filter. The shorter the chain of that molecule, you know, the fewer carbons it has bonded to those fluorines. It's just like anything else. You know, if you put a fence up that big, you know, a Labrador might not get through it, but a Chihuahua would. And we're finding more and more Chihuahuas and even smaller things, you know, and so it means that they're going to have to do a better and better job about monitoring for breakthroughs and what they're monitoring for. And they shouldn't have to, you know, they shouldn't have to be every day thinking about what's the next new chemical that I've got to get ready for here, that I've got to, you know, be monitoring for, that I've got to, you know, change out my filter medium in advance because things can slip through. And 1,4-dioxane, you know, I mean, that even reverse osmosis isn't an effective treatment for 1,4-dioxane. So it's not like I think the CFPUA has done a really good job, but we are not talking about a perfect system over there. I think they are going to continue to try to make it better, but we're not talking about, you know, 100% treatment there. Dana, what do you think?
Well, I just looked up, so you can look up, you can just Google CFPUA Gen X results, that's how they have it kind of in the Google land. So today, the finished water has 30.62 parts per trillion combined of what they're sampling for. They're sampling for about 70, I think, different types of PFAS. So that's 30.62. We don't know the health advisory levels of the ones that they're finding because these are the ultra short chains. We don't know if those things are dangerous for us. The other thing we don't know is that there are at least 250 other types of PFAS in the Cape Fear River that we can't even quantify. That we don't have a clue the concentration of. They're not sampling for those either. So we just, all that goes into account when you're considering what's the exposures are right now.
I looked up the 1,4-dioxane. They also published their 1,4-dioxane numbers, and before the hearing that we had in Ashboro, it was an EPA hearing. I looked up, like, I think it was over the last 5 years. 1,4-dioxane got above 0.35 parts per million, or parts per trillion, which is the EPA threshold level, 39% of the time. It's like 140 days a year that 1,4-dioxane was higher than it should have been. And we've got the most advanced water treatment plant in the entire state of North Carolina. Like, think about, I mean, this is a plant that is at the end of the line. We're the last user on the river, so everybody dumps upstream of us. So they knew they had to be good before the PFAS story hit, and they had a really advanced system. And then the PFAS story hit, and they invested $70 million in, 70-ish million dollars in this GAC system that they're using now. And we're still exceeding 1,4-dioxane 140 times a year. So, take that.
When they clean this out, what do they do with the residual product?
So they truck it up to New York, and they run it through a thermal oxidizer, and then they take exactly what they sent up to New York and ran through the thermal oxidizer, and they bring it back here because they don't want to have like cross-contamination of the medium, because our medium is designed for our plant and everything. But I mean, that's why it's so expensive. That's why we're paying, what is it, like, how many millions of dollars is it a year that we spend just in maintenance of that system?
I think it's like, for maintenance? Yeah, I think it's somewhere around 7-ish.
Yeah. So, you know, that's every year forever and ever, until industry stops being allowed to put this stuff in the river. We'll have to keep taking it out and spending $7 million a year on top of what we spent to put the whole system in. Do Dana, and then I'll get to you.
Just on the point of the carbon that's being shipped across the country, they're shifting it to different states. New York was the beginning. I think they're moving into like Kentucky and other things. And generally, these are like environmental justice areas where it's primarily low-income people, where they're just going to put this filthy system. And when I talked with the gentleman that was running the system that was cleaning the Sweeney's carbon, I said, who's watching and what kind of permitting do you need and what are the releases coming out of those stacks? And he said, literally, I put this in a legal document. We are very safe. That's it. So we don't know what they're doing with it. You know, the wastewater discharge gets shipped down to Deer Park, Texas for deep well injection in the ground. So, and also an environmental justice community in Texas. And so these filtration things, that for me, it's always just so important to remember that not only is it costly for humans, but in terms of economics, it's costly for CFPUA to keep doing this. But it's never going to be the answer. Filtration of PFAS is never the answer because you can't destroy this stuff. You're just moving it around.
What do they want the industries to do then?
They want the industry to treat the waste on site and not discharge it into drinking water supplies.
So they will have to treat it.
Right, and they'll have to pay for it.
And who will monitor that?
DEQ would monitor. That would be a requirement. If the EMC writes a law that sets a standard, a health standard for PFAS 1,4-dioxane, then DEQ will be responsible for writing the permits and monitoring those permits that require industry to meet those standards. But industry will pay for it.
But what's the timeline? I mean, do they have like 10 years to adhere to the rules, or 5 years?
I mean, the state could write a permit today, or they could pull a permit today of an existing industry. Let's take Lear, for example, that plant that's up on the Northeast Cape Fear that's discharging and is producing so much PFAS and fish tissue. Today, well, tomorrow, DEQ could notify Lear that they are requiring new conditions in their permit, and that new condition could be you're no longer permitted to discharge PFAS into the Northeast Cape River. At any point, they can open a permit and do that. So it would not take years to implement good rules if we put good rules in place. But these are not good rules. And so, yeah.
Speaking of residual, it's latent in the environment, though, right? So they're still going to be around for a long, long, long time. So it's almost stopping it, but it does seem to be, you're still going to have to have treatment here to keep it out of water systems. So it's almost the two, you got to go both paths no matter what, it seems like. Is that, just think of an argument that we just don't want it ended to be dumped in the river. It's everywhere. Right. It's latent
No, you're right. It is in the environment. It's in the sediment. You know, I mean, it is. If you go out and take a water sample right now, you'll find it in the river. No question about it. But we should definitely be requiring industry to stop putting more in because of the fact. I mean, it's called PFAS in particular. It's called forever chemicals because that molecule never breaks down under natural. I mean, you have to, expose it to incredibly high heat. There's, but even then, you're exposing it to high heat, as Dana said, in another community somewhere else. So, yeah, I mean, I think we are likely to be paying for water treatment in the Cape Fear, for a long, long time. But it should be getting. We should be able to say, well, we don't have to worry about breakthrough happening quite as quickly because we've turned off the tap at industry and they're no longer discharging, ultra short chains here. And so this filter medium might last 2 more months, which means, it's only going to cost us $4 million a year instead of $7 million a year.
Has it been studied more the half-life of its existence, or is there I mean, not it itself, but is there some evidence that within a couple of months or a year or something it will taper off?
Oh, you mean that if you stop it at the industrial discharge, is there? Well, we saw that with Chemours, right? So when we sued Chemours and required them to stop discharging PFAS into the Cape Fear River, PFAS levels went down by like 2 orders of magnitude. So it's not gone. I mean, we didn't fix the whole problem overnight by telling them to go put it in Deer Park's groundwater or somebody else's air, but it dramatically reduced the amount of PFAS in the river, which dramatically reduced the amount going into CFPUA. But these things are, they are very persistent. Yes.
I don't know if this is the right forum for this question because it's more about nutrition, but right off the bat when he was born, we switched to reverse osmosis water because it was as soon as I found out about it. And so I'm thinking like a kid growing bones and teeth and these kind of things, reverse osmosis, my understanding is that it takes all of the nutrients and minerals out of the water. So is there any research on problems around growing up only drinking reverse osmosis water instead of water that has like natural minerals in it?
Yeah, Byron, guys.
A fair answer to that is you get a lot of that from food that you eat.
Okay.
So
Well, that's good to know.
you're not getting a lot of those nutrients so much from your water as you are from your food.
Okay.
And you need the water to digest and process the food.
That's one nice thing to hear.
I do remember talking, and this doesn't exactly get to your point, but I guess the overall point that it might make is that we shouldn't have to spend all this money to treat our water to get it to be perfectly pure, because sometimes that's a bad thing too. And I remember early on we were talking about ROs, and people were like, well, I want to get a whole house RO. And Detlef Knappe, the guy who kind of broke the story, said, that's not a great idea either, because you remove a lot of the things, like, if you run water that's had all of the disinfectants removed out of through the pipes in your home, then you're going to get some pretty serious, bacteria growth in those pipes and in the hot water heater, and that can make you sick. And so it's not to say that like there aren't kind of secondary concerns if you install an RO system and you do. I mean, a lot of people put the little mineral drops back in their water, for instance. So I think certainly you do get it from your food, but there are things to consider about changing your water a little bit.
Fluoride being a big one.
Yeah, fluoride.
Just one other point on RO, and that is another thing that Luke used to say is that, there are people, if you're on a private well, for instance, and you've gotten a filter, an RO filter from the Chemours, from the consent order, some of the folks that I spoke with didn't want to put the RO in because they are on a septic. And so the RO system pulls in water, and then it runs it through the filter, and there's a waste stream that goes out back into the system. So they didn't want to put that PFAS contaminated water into their community. So they opted out. So there's that other issue with RO. Cape Riverwatch had to submit comments on the RO system that's still not in place for Brunswick County, because they're going to take Cape River water, run it through RO, and then dump the highly contaminated PFAS that's the waste back into this cycle. So it's just like, obviously, filtration is not great. And so more and more pressure we put on this industry on the whole, the more that they are inclined to research for alternatives. And so if we keep doing that, that's where we need to be, because filtration is definitely not the answer. And I wanted to comment on, somebody was talking about just the either-or system for issues, and I spoke with Lindsay, who is my colleague at Audubon today, who's going up to Raleigh today to speak, because she has a conflict, and she had this really great analogy, and she said, you know, if you're pouring chlorine down your throat, you don't say, wait, let's study that a little bit more before you stop putting the chlorine down your throat. So you can do both. You can study, you know, the effects of chlorine PFAS in your body. At the same time, you stop the ingestion of the problem. And so there has been conversation from some of the folks that are working on this daily. That I just spoke with a couple of them last Friday for quite some time. And they said that there's an inclination by some of the EMC members that this is an either-or situation, that you can't do a standard to stop it at the source and also study. And that is something that they suggested. I suggest to folks to make sure that that's clear. We can do both. We can do all of it. We need more data on the health outcomes. We need more data on the exposures. We need more data on the dischargers across the whole state. But at the same time, we need to stop pouring bleach down our throat.
Kim, do we know if the PFAS and dioxane bioconcentrates up the food chain, because then it's in the bigger fish, and we know there are some people that